Welcome back. The South African government is hosting peace talks in Pretoria to end the Tigray conflict. Delegates from the Ethiopian government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front arrived in the country this week. The talks are facilitated by former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta, and former Deputy South African President Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. Now, for more on this, we are joined by Thembisa Fakude, a director at Africa-Asia Dialogue. Thembisa, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, the negotiations aimed at ending a 2-year conflict that has left thousands of civilians dead and millions uprooted have led to talks facilitated by former President Obasanjo as well as Kenyatta, as well as the former Deputy President of South Africa, Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. Now, what significance have these leaders brought to the peace talks?
Well, all of them bring with them specific experience. If you look at President Obasanjo, who used to be the president of Nigeria and who also chaired the EU during the negotiations of the Darfurians and the Sudanese government. So that's a very huge experience that's brought in. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, former deputy president of South Africa and also the chief executive officer of UN Women, also brings with her an experience, including Uhuru Kenyatta, who's been facilitating the peace negotiation in DRC Congo. So these are very experienced individuals, and one hopes, of course, that they will somehow bring some sort of at least achieve first steps towards negotiations, because I'm not quite sure that they will be able to achieve a peaceful settlement in a week. But I think what they'll do in this week will be first to ensure that there's a safe passage for aid and food into Tigray, and number two is to achieve some sort of cessation of hostilities in Ethiopia. So if they achieve that, then we are able, or we will be able to start the negotiations in earnest.
Now, you penned an opinion piece where you mentioned that the talks being hosted on behalf of the African Union will entrench President Cyril Ramaphosa's status as a leading statesman on the continent. Why is that so?
Well, I think first, if you remember, President Cyril Ramaphosa, as the chairperson of COVID-19, was extremely instrumental in ensuring that we get the vaccines, not only South Africans, but the entire Africa. So that kind of added a feather in his shoulder. The second, of course, is the continuation of him facilitating this just transition into clean and alternative energies. So now we have this happening in South Africa. So it will certainly entrench him as a leader and as a statesman in Africa who can actually help facilitate many other things, in Africa. It's something that we've last seen amplified during the times of President Nelson Mandela.
Now, because of this war, thousands have been killed and millions displaced in Tigray, as well as neighboring provinces, with thousands facing famine, and many women suffered at the hands of weaponized sexual violence. What has been the economical cost to the Tigray region?
Well, we're told at the moment that it's over $50 billion in terms of economic costs to this war. But you have millions of people displaced, not only in Tigray, but also surrounding provinces, and thousands have been killed because of this war. So it's quite a serious economic impact that this has had, but also socio-politically, this has had a very, very serious impact on Ethiopia in general.
I mean, you mentioned earlier that there's no way that we could reach peace within a week, but the talks are 5 days in. Do we know of any progress that has been made in these 5 days?
Well, they've kept their cards close to their chest, so we don't even know how far they are with negotiations. If you remember last week, many of us were caught by surprise when the announcement was made that the negotiations were going to start on the 24th. So we don't know yet. We'll have to wait for the press conference, which I'm sure has to happen, because this is not only a business of the negotiators, but it involves all of us, including the Ethiopians, who are also waiting for good news that this to come out of this, but South Africans as well. As taxpayers, we are definitely footing the bill in this regard. So we deserve to know what's going on, and I'm hoping that on Monday there will be some sort of press conference where all journalists and other people concerned in this conflict will be gathered to be briefed about what has happened over the past 7 days.
Most certainly. And lastly now, what's the current status on the ground in that region? And is the government likely to give in to the demands that could come out of these peace talks?
Well, there's still some fighting, because I don't think the memo has trickled down to the boots on the ground. So there are some skirmishes and fighting that continues in Tigray. Second, to answer the second question, the Ethiopian government has pushed back the TPLF, and I don't think that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed will give in to any demand that will come from TPLF, given the gains that they've made on the ground. Abiy Ahmed is likely, for example, to insist on the TPLF to disarm, and is also likely to insist on the new elections. As you know, the reason why we're here we are at the moment is because the TPLF insisted on going ahead with the election, notwithstanding that the federal government said those elections must be suspended due to COVID-19. So I don't see the government of Ethiopia giving in at the moment, because they have an upper hand right now. TPLF is on a back foot, so they are likely to push for cessation of hostilities, but at the same time for disarmament of TPLF forces.
Well, we certainly do hope that these talks will bring out some positive feedback, especially for the people of Ethiopia. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Fakude. That's Thembisa Fakude, who's the Director of Africa-Asia Dialogue.